Welcome to an episode of the Upriver Crawfish channel. I'm your host, Sankara. Sankara is my nom de guerre. I pay homage to Captain Thomas Sankara, one of the immortal African giants. Today, on this episode, we'll be analyzing Africa's engagement with China. Is China a partner for Africa? That's what we'll be trying to assess. Recently, let's say maybe in the last 5 to 6 years, there have been narratives that are propagating around the world about China's engagement in Africa. One of the narratives is that China is a neo-colonial power. China wants to exploit Africa for her resources. China does not care about human rights. And China practices debt trap diplomacy. Certainly, these narratives can be applied to the West as well. But so far, recently, again, let's say in the last 5 to 6 years, it's been heavily focused on China. Even some Africans carry on these narratives as well. So we'll go ahead and proceed from there. Is China a partner for Africa? Or are those narratives true? Allow me to have Vladimir Putin describe what a unipolar world is. I'm going to use that in my analysis. This is a speech that Vladimir Putin gave in 2007 at the Munich Security Conference, and I think it's entitled "Wars Not Diminishing."
Only 2 decades ago, the world was ideologically and economically divided, and it was the huge strategic potential of 2 superpowers that ensured global security. This global standoff pushed the sharpest economic and social problems to the margins of the international communities and the world's agenda. And just like any war, the Cold War left us with live ammunition, figuratively speaking. I'm referring to ideological stereotypes, double standards, and other typical aspects of Cold War bloc thinking. The unipolar world that had been proposed after the Cold War did not take place either. The history of humanity certainly has gone through unipolar periods and seen aspirations to world supremacy, and what hasn't happened in world history. However, what is a unipolar world? However one might embellish this term, at the end of the day it refers to one type of situation, namely one center of authority, one center of force, one center of decision-making. It is a world in which there is one master, one sovereign, and at the end of the day, this is pernicious not only for those within this system, but also for the sovereign itself, because it destroys itself from within. And this certainly has nothing in common with democracy, because, as you know, democracy is the power of the majority, in light of the interests and opinions of the minority. Incidentally, Russia, we, are constantly being taught about democracy, but for some reason those who teach us do not want to learn themselves. I consider that the unipolar model is not only unacceptable, but also impossible in today's world. And this is not only because if there was individual leadership in today's and precisely in today's world, and the military, political and economic resources would not suffice. What is even more important is that the model itself is flawed, because at its basis, there is and can be no moral foundations for modern civilization. Along with this, what is happening in today's world, and we just started to discuss this, is a tentative to introduce precisely this concept into international affairs, the concept of a unipolar world, and with which results unilateral and frequently illegitimate actions have not resolved any problems. Moreover, they have caused new human tragedies and created new centers of tension. Judge for yourselves. Wars as well as local and regional conflicts have not diminished. Mr. Telchik mentioned this very gently. And no less people perish in these conflicts. Even more are dying than before, significantly more, significantly more. Today we are witnessing an almost uncontained hyper-use of force, military force, in international relations.
So we heard from Vladimir Putin. To address this question whether China is a partner for Africa, we can't begin without first addressing the current world order. So what is the current world order? Right now, the current world order, since the fall of the Soviet Union, we've had a Western world order. The U.S. has been trying to usher in and make accepted a unipolar world order where the U.S. will be the only sovereign. As Putin described it, it doesn't matter how you want to see it, how you try to interpret it in pretty language or diplomatic language. A unipolar world order means there is going to be only one sovereign, one center of authority, one decision-making body on force. So basically, one master. Since 1990, we have seen the U.S., what the U.S. intends to usher to the world. Pretty much it's U.S. supremacy over the world. In fact, the former National Security Advisor, Zbigniew Brzezinski, wrote a book about maintaining U.S. primacy over the world. So what does this world order, what does this current world order entails? What is it about? How has Africa fared in this world order? We know the U.S. goal is a unipolar world order. Again, with the U.S. as the only sovereign state. It's accompanied by the belief that the U.S. is an exceptional state. U.S. exceptionalism. So U.S. can do no wrong. If the U.S. does something, then it must be right. We have seen what this world order has mean for the world, in Africa in particular. There's been wars of aggression. Let's take about Iraq. Let's take a look at Afghanistan. We just pulled out of Afghanistan after 20 years of a disastrous, very disastrous occupation. We have seen situations in where the U.S. has used assassinations, done regime change. Just about maybe 2 years ago, we saw the U.S. decide for a whole country, a comical puppet, Juan Guaido, will be the president of Venezuela Was not even elected. So that's some of what we have seen in this current world order. In this current world order, Africa has experienced assassinations, regime change wars, conflicts created externally, created and managed externally, that led to civil wars. Terrorism is now prevalent in the Sahel. We're seeing economic warfare and strangulation as we have seen against Zimbabwe, even Sudan, Eritrea. We are seeing perpetual underdevelopment on the continent and exploitation in the Democratic Republic of Congo. This has led to our youth having no prospect for a better future. They have fled north to get on boats to go to Europe. And then the Westerners who together have set up the world that they live in are denying them entry. Some of them are dying in the boatloads in the Mediterranean. It's almost like back in the transatlantic slave trade, when Africans slaves were jumping overboard sometimes, preferring death than the treatment they were receiving on slave ships. And sometimes the slavers themselves threw them overboard for whatever different reasons. So we're back in 2021 and we see African youth flooding to Europe, ending up dying in the Mediterranean. We're seeing the destruction of Libya, a once prosperous African nation, totally destroyed, to the point now we have open air slave prisons, slave markets in Libya. That's the current world order. Let's go back to back in 1980, the 70s to 1980. The U.S. assassinated a Liberian president, William R. Tolbert. What was Tolbert's crime? Tolbert's crime was that he wanted Liberia to industrialize. He wanted the rubber to benefit the people of the country. He wanted our resources, rubber, iron ore, to benefit the people of the country, and in order to do so, he wanted Liberia to industrialize. The U.S. didn't want to do it. His brother Stephen Tolbert, who was in conversation with Firestone to get more concessions, he was assassinated. His plane went down. You know, African leaders just tend to come up dead whenever they oppose the West. We just saw what happened to Magufuli in Tanzania. They just happened to come up dead. In Africa, we got the saying, they say the invisible hand. We know that the CIA work. Right. Now, it's not a funny thing. I laugh more out of trying to put light to the situation a little bit, because it angers me. But that's what happened to William R. Tolbert. He was brutally assassinated. Then Liberia went through a period where we had now the imposed puppet in power, and for the next 10 years, incompetent person put in power. For the next 10 years, he ran the country. And at different times, the U.S. now wanted to get rid of him when he wouldn't do their bidding. And oftentimes when someone is not doing their bidding, that's because, and quite often sometimes they're trying to now maybe do things because they live in the country. They're trying to do things to improve things in the country. So now they decide to get rid of him and impose upon the country a brutal war, a brutal civil war. Approximately 250 Liberians lost their lives. There was a point in time before the war reached to the city when the ambassador had negotiated for the U.S. puppet Samuel Doe to leave so that the war would not come to the city. But the U.S. was not interested in that. They wanted to put that trauma on the whole country. So Liberia went into the civil war, and we are where we are right now. Let's go take a look at the Democratic Republic of Congo. They also went there. The first Prime Minister of the Democratic Republic of Congo, the U.S. assassinated him, Patrice Lumumba. His crime? He wanted to govern in a different way. That's his crime. So, just as the U.S. preached self-determination, and they want self-determination for themselves here, which I think is a good thing for every different people. That's not what they want for us. So Africans have to understand that what you see in the U.S., the procedures, legal system, a lawful system, that's not what is proposed for Africa. The industrialization you see here is not for us. This particular current world order requires Africa to be an extraction colony, a resource extraction colony, like it's happening in the Democratic Republic of Congo. That's the current world order that we have. So, before I even move on to consider what the rise of China is bringing forth, I will ask the African, what in this current world order do you see that is good for Africa? What in this current world order could you defend? What in this current world order for Africa are you proud of? Okay. I want to go ahead and show a little book written by Dr. Niels Hahn. It is a definitive book on Africa. It's about Liberia in particular, and it will talk about the situation in Liberia regarding President William R. Tolbert. I mean, it's a book that goes back to the beginning, to the forming of the country. I mean, it's one of the most brilliant work I've ever come across. And it's easy read. It's not too long. It's very easy read. I mean, not just usually when intellectuals write, they write in bland language, in highfalutin languages that makes it boring to read. But this is not the case. The language is very easy to read for anybody, and it is fun to read as well. So I think Liberians in particular should always to read this book. But Africans in general should also read this book, because what happened in Liberia is propagated across the continent. The book is called 2 Centuries of U.S. Military Operations in Liberia, Challenges of Resistance and Compliance. So basically, if we resist the West, this current world order, if we resist the West, you get economic strangulation, you get assassinations, regime change, true color revolution or some wars, civil war, we get stuff like that. If we comply, then it means perpetual underdevelopment and exploitation. That's the world order that we have. So guys, you can get this book. It is you can download it free, but I would just ask people, if you can afford it, go to Amazon and purchase the book in paperback, because guys like these, especially guys from the West that write about these countries, they put all the blame on the African countries. This guy did not do that. This is a sober and objective script that he wrote about Liberia. And boy, he was very detailed. So I would advise you guys to please purchase it. Purchase a copy. It is a book you can let other people read as well. So that's what we have, folks, in this current world order. I also want to go and show a video from a session that Professor Jeffrey Sachs had, and he spoke about the situation in Congo. So hold on, we'll go ahead and get that going.
Food system. It's based on large multinational companies. It's based on private profits. It's based on a very, very low measure of international transfers to help poor people, sometimes none at all. It's based on extreme irresponsibility of powerful countries with regard to the environment, and it's based on a radical denial of rights of poor people, as we just heard. It's interesting, we heard from the Minister of DRC, what's wrong with your country? Well, we don't even start by saying the King of Belgium created a slave colony for 30 years. The government of Belgium ran the slave colony for another 40 years. The CIA assassinated your first popular leader, Mr. Lumumba, and then installed another dictatorship for the next 30 years. And then Glencore and others now suck out your cobalt without giving you tax income. We don't reflect on that. We say, what's wrong with you? Why don't you govern properly? And so we have a system.
We just listened to Professor Jeffrey Sachs speak about the situation in the Democratic Republic of Congo and the murder of Patrice Lumumba, as well as the current state of affairs in the Democratic Republic of Congo. So now let's go ahead and talk about the approaching world order. I would say we are actually in that world order right now, though the U.S. is fighting hard to reverse it. So the world order that we are going into is the multipolar world order. That world order is driven primarily by the rise of China and to a lesser extent, the reemergence of Russia. Prior to the last 200 years, China and India were the dominant economic power on this earth. And that's primarily because of the amount of people they have in the country. When you have a large population, especially if you industrialize, that can help towards economic growth. You got a bigger market, a lot of economic activities. So China's rise is inevitable, especially now that they are a fully industrialized nation. And with that huge population, 1.4 billion people. So that can be stopped. I mean, some say maybe 10 to 15 years ago, or probably more than 15 years ago, that the U.S. could strangle the Chinese economy. Possibly that could be true. I disagree. I think they could have slowed it down, but I don't know that they could have strangled it. Because again, as we want to point out, that's a huge market. Take for example, the Chinese middle class is around 400 million people. The whole of the U.S. is around what? 350 million people. So just the Chinese middle class is around 400 million people. No other market has that large of a middle class. Right? So China could sell to itself and still grow. But China is also the number one partner of a lot of countries in the world, especially in Asia. As you would note, I point out that Eurasia here, because to be frank, the rise of China and Russia and the reemergence of Russia drives the multipolar world order, but also Asia. There are a lot of people in Asia. Those are countries that are developing, and a lot of them have China as their major economic partner. So one of the things that would that comes with this, that is characterized by that the multipolar world order is characterized by, is a respect for sovereignty and culture. The West have never respected other people's culture, and they definitely do not respect sovereignty. And it's the reason to go and kill leaders, for create civil wars, and just destruction everywhere they go. So this is the world order that's coming. It's going to bring trade and development, improve international security and stability, because if you no longer have to worry about your leaders being killed or your countries being social engineered into civil war, then you're a little bit more secure and you could have stability. There's also going to be opportunities for everyone to prosper. This is what that multipolar world is going to usher. Now, let me crystallize this by giving you a story of two choices. There's an exploitative relationship with a friend called frenemy, I would say, called Donald, and a partnership with she. and the pond is intended here. Let's assume that you are a poor farmer, probably have 300 acres of land, but as good as you are, as hardworking as you are as a farmer, you do not have resources, industrial farming resources. You don't have access to outside markets, and you do not have people to help you farm your land. So, as best as you can do, you were able to farm maybe 5 or 10 acres of your land. So, about 290 acres lie dormant. You get some. You are doing subsistence farming. Feeds your family. You can take some to the market, to the local markets, and you would get some money to buy books for your kids to go to school and stuff like that. But that's it. So one day you fall into some emergency that requires a huge amount of money that you don't have. I mean, very huge amount of money, existential type money. So you have two friends. You first go to this one friend called Donald. Donald is a wealthy farmer. He has about 3,000 acres of land. And he has access to outside markets. He has industrial farming equipment. He has all the resources, food processing plants as well. You go to Donald and you ask for help. The help Donald decides to give you is that he will buy your land for you at the price of the amount you need to resolve the emergency. Donald knows you can't pay him back, so he doesn't want to really give you a loan. So he proposed that he would buy the land from you at the price that will take care of your emergency. He will allow you to live in the shack that you have on the land. And he will have you become a foreman on that land, foreman for the farmers on the land. And he would pay you $18 per hour, give you medical insurance, whatever. So that's the choice that's one choice there. And this choice means that you no longer will have agency on your land. The emergency you fell into will be resolved, but you no longer have agency on your land. You can't leave it to your kids. And so now you're a wage laborer. So you listen to Donald's proposal. So, okay. He gave you about a couple of days to accept or decline the offer. You then go to this other friend, she. Of course, she is also a wealthy farmer, about 3,000 acres as well. Similar to Donald, it has access to outside markets, has processing, has food processing plants. She looks at your situation and said, you know what? This guy is a hard worker. He has potential. So she tells you, this is what I will do. I will give you the loan now that will take care of that emergency. What I will require, though, is for you to bring, because I know you cannot pay me back easily for the amount of money that your emergency costs. So I'm going to create the opportunity for you to be able to pay me back. So I will not buy your land and take your land from you because I know you have to. You want to leave it to your kids. But what I would do requires that we'll get into a farming co-op. We'll bring your farm into our co-op. My land is now full with a lot of other cash crops, but I have some other cash crops that I got partners abroad that they need. I need to farm them. Need to get those produce on the farm. So I'll bring you into the co-op, and I will give you the resources, all the industrial equipments, manpower resources, for you to go ahead for us to farm this land with the new produce, new cash crops. And you will be the foreman on this land. You'll get $18 per hour in medical benefits. But what's going to happen now is that when we harvest the produce and I sell the produce, the proceeds we get back, we'll take out the operating cost of the farm. The profit, you and I will split it in a 60-50, 60-40 split in my favor, in she's favor. So you look at that situation. One, your immediate need is taken care of by the loan. Two, your long-term need where you're able to give your land back to your kids when you pass away is taken care of. You are a foreman, so you get regular payments right now on land. You are not a wage laborer, so you still have agency in your land. And by the way, the loan you owe this guy is getting paid all through the money you get because you will get dividends. You get your regular pay as the foreman, but you also get dividends once the produce is sold and you guys get profit. You get dividends. So those are the options you have. Now you tell me, which choice would you choose? For my money, I would say would choose the option, the proposal by Xi. That's the choices that Africa have. You have the current world order that the U.S. is trying to keep or propagate, wherein there's one sovereign, and the approaching world order where there will be respect for sovereignty of every other country, and ushers in trade, development, security, opportunity for all to prosper. What will you choose? We'll now answer that question right away. Move on to the next chapter, which I'll call See the Forest, not the trees. But before I show you that, before I go through that, I will start that off by showing you a clip from Yanis Varoufakis. Yanis Varoufakis is the former finance minister of Greece. Let's proceed to that now.
I've been very concerned lately about China and sort of we have transferred so much money from our economy over to China by buying all those things and supporting their economy over there so they could make more and more money. They are now all over Africa, buying things and investing over there and getting those countries dependent on them and supporting, non-democratic people. And I'm just
like
wondering,
whom?
Well,
we are in a country that supports Saudi Arabia.
yes, that's
Yeah?
true. Right. So
Suddenly we have a problem with, superpowers supporting non-democratic people.
Yes, yes, I do, but I also am just concerned that we've sort of created the economic power that China sort of has now, and they're using it, I fear, going to be using it against us eventually and against the better interests of a lot of people.
Allow me to put your mind to rest.
Okay, great.
You shouldn't worry about that.
Okay.
It's very simple. And let me explain why you shouldn't worry about that. But please continue.
Well, they're, they're in Africa. They're lending money to countries to build ports and different infrastructure.
To build what?
Port,
And what's wrong with that?
And, well, because...
Countries that need ports get ports.
But they're making people dependent on... I know, it's the same thing that we've done, which is
No, it's not.
horrible around the world.
They are far more humanistic than the United States ever was.
Really? Okay.
Absolutely.
Great. So...
Let me give you an example. Of course they are peddling for influence.
Yeah.
Yeah? But they are non-interventionist. Absolutely non-interventionist in a way that Europeans, the West, has never managed to fathom.
But I have a feeling they have a longer-term thought process that is more interventionist.
All right. But
anyway,
let's judge what we see. Let's judge what.
Okay.
Wait, let's start at the beginning. The Chinese never asked Apple to go to Shenzhen and produce all the iPhones. It was Steve Jobs that decided that. Yeah? Mm-hmm. It was not China that went to Washington, D.C. and demanded that they buy a third of your national debt. If they hadn't bought it, you would be in serious trouble. Mm-hmm. Okay. Number 3. I did allude to this in my talk. If in 2008 China had not cranked up their credit bubble, you would be in a new Great Depression now. Mm-hmm. So, China, the United States, and the European Union are absolutely synergistic, and they need one another in a way that if we fail to acknowledge and to nurture, billions of people, including the majority of the people in this country, are going to suffer. Now, I am not going to stand here and defend China and the Chinese Communist Party. I already made some negative remarks about the Chinese Communist Party in referring to, their attitudes as being compatible with those of Wolfgang Schäuble. My concern about China is the authoritarian manner in which the Chinese regime is treating the Chinese people. As a Democrat, I have a problem with this. Mind you, I have to tell you that, from my understanding of China, it's a very interesting social experiment, in the sense that at the local level, the regional level, you now have a boisterous democracy. At the local and regional level. Even with popular success stories in overthrowing local authorities, local bureaucrats who have been corrupt, who have been this, who have been that, who have been the other. When it comes to the influence of China outside its borders, I have to say, firstly, it's quite remarkable that they don't seem to have any military ambitions. Secondly, Africa. I'll give you an example, a specific example. Ethiopia. 2004, because I happened to be there, and I have some first-hand experience of it. They went into Ethiopia. I'll tell you why they went into Ethiopia, because they suspected there was oil. Because China is a major industrial power, but it lacks primary resources. Now, instead of going into Africa with troops, colonially, destroying the country, killing people like the West has done for the last 100 years, what they did was they went to Addis Ababa and they said to the government, we would like, we can see you have problems with your infrastructure, we would like to build some new airports, upgrade your railway system, create a telephone system, and rebuild your roads. And we'll do this all for free. No strings attached. We don't want anything from you. And they did. Why did they do it? Because this is soft power. Because because they knew that if oil is discovered, and it was discovered later, then, of course, the Ethiopian government will be much more open to Chinese oil companies coming there. They have never combined their investment with imperialistic. You know, when I was Minister of Finance, I had a very interesting experience with COSCO, one of the Chinese national companies that, in the end, bought the port of Piraeus. When I moved into the ministry, I found a contract from the previous government that they had already sold the port of Piraeus for a pittance and other ridiculous conditions to the Chinese, under the guidance, of course, of the European Union and the International Monetary Fund as well. And in other words, as a minister, I was bound to a particular deal that was terrible for Greece. And I went to the Chinese and discussed it with them. And I was really astonished. I said to them, look, you're paying too little, you're not committing to a sufficient level of investment, and you are treating our workers as fodder. You are effectively subcontracting labor to horrible companies that exploit the workers, and I can't deal with this. And effectively, I proposed to them to renegotiate the contract. So instead of getting 67% of the shares of the port, they would get, with the same price, 51. The remaining shares would go into the Greek pension fund system in order to bolster the capitalization of the public pensions. Secondly, I want you to commit to 180 million euros of investment within 12 months. And thirdly, proper collective bargaining with the trade unions and no subcontracting of labor. And to my astonishment, they said, okay. Can you imagine if that was a German company or an American company? That's why I'm saying I don't think you should worry.
Okay, I won't.
That was former Greece finance minister Yanis Varoufakis. So, as you heard Yanis, he gave some examples of how the Chinese operate. Before I go into what Yanis said, let me point out a couple of things. First, one of the things that we tend to mischaracterize with regards to China's engagement with Africa is we do not seem to distinguish between Chinese government actions versus Chinese individuals and Chinese corporations. It is important for us to understand the difference here. Chinese individuals and Chinese corporations, like any other group of people that have gone to African countries before, that have misbehaved, like the Lebanese, the Indians, that have misbehaved in those countries. We need to understand that. Versus the Chinese government. The Chinese government is not dictating to Africa that we allow the Chinese people, individuals and corporations, to behave badly. That's not what's happening. By contrast, the U.S. government would step in if we try to punish a U.S. individual or corporation for breaking our laws. Another thing is Africa's own responsibility and agency. Those people, those Chinese individuals and Chinese corporations that misbehave in Africa, they misbehave in countries where the laws are weak, the government officials are kleptocrats, greedy, incompetent. We need to have agency for ourselves. We need to have agency for our own country. If you set laws, the Chinese individuals and corporations will follow it. Not just the Chinese, any other individual, foreign individuals that and corporations that go in your country, they will follow it. The Chinese are in Ethiopia. You don't hear them misbehaving there. They're in Egypt. You don't hear them misbehaving there. But you hear them misbehaving in Zambia and in South Africa. It's the case of South Africa. Some South Africans stole away on a ship, a Chinese ship, and they got found out. The Chinese threw them into the water, shark-infested water. They managed to get to the shore. South African Navy or Coast Guard managed to bring the ship back to port. What did the South African government do for attempted murder? They told them to pay $1 million and be on their way. That's what they did. It was not the Chinese government that told them to do so. The Chinese government is not going to come into your country and tell you how to treat Chinese citizens. They don't do that. They are non-interventionists. In Zambia, a Chinese corporation processing copper, they were told by the Zambian government, given laws that says don't overwork the people, 8-hour shifts. Don't overwork the people. They don't pay attention to that. They go ahead and proceed doing what they want to do. That corporation also went and brought in Chinese farmers and gave them money and loans and stuff to end up competing with the Zambian farmers. It's not China, the government of China, CCP, that required that. They could take advantage of those laws because they were operating in the environment that they're operating in. Zambia have greedy politicians, inept politicians. So they operate under that. We do that. In Zambia, they do that electioneering stuff as well. So the Chinese corporation just buy each government that coming into power. As you see, what Yanis pointed out to the lady, and that lady, by the way, I don't know if you got the sense of her entitlement to Africa. I actually felt she was so entitled to Africa. It was funny. But as Yanis pointed out, Chinese are more humanistic. Yes, they're peddling for influence as well, but not at the end of a gun. Not by fomenting civil war in your country. See the situation in Greece. The previous government sold the port of Piraeus for a pittance. The Chinese bought it for a pittance. The Chinese company bought it for a pittance. Are you expecting the Chinese government to come and tell them, oh, don't buy it for a pittance? No. A 2021 BMW M760i costs about $150,000. If I went to go and buy it and the dealer decided he would give it to me for $20,000, well, you bet your ass I'm going to take it. I'm not going to tell him, no, you're supposed to sell it to me for $150,000. I'm not going to do that. So Yanis went back to renegotiate. When his government came into power, he went back to renegotiate the Port of Piraeus deal. And he put all the rules down, and he was surprised that the Chinese accepted it. You set your rules, you set your standards for what you want, the Chinese will abide by it. You have to have agency in your own country. You have to have responsibility for yourselves. If you don't set the rules, the Chinese they're not going to follow. They're going to just follow the process that you have in the country. So let's go to what's China's goals in Africa, in the world as a whole, not just Africa. All right. Long term is straight, but let me explain it, break it down to you. Wait a minute. You see, China rose because one of the things they did was that they had cheap labor and allowed other countries to bring their goods, companies from other countries to bring the goods in the country and utilize that cheap labor. Made those companies, their products competitive on the world market. And China started to grow, and the government used good policies, and China advanced. One of the things that happen is that when you grow, you get to a certain point where there becomes stagnation, because as you grow due to the cheap labor, at a certain point in time now, as the country advances, labor rates have to increase. It gets to the point where your labor is no longer cheap for people to go ahead and send their goods to be made in your country. You hit what economists call the middle income trap. You have to do something to advance. A lot of times other countries find themselves in there and they're struggling to figure out how to advance. Like Indonesia and stuff like that, some middle income countries like that. The West, their choice was to go and invade other people's countries. By colonizing other people's countries, stealing the resources. Think the British in India. The British took $30 trillion out of India. Let me say that again. 30 trillion. That's trillion with a T. $30 trillion out of India. And starved those people to death. That's how they advance. China has a different approach. They look at the excess capacity that they have. Say we could put those to use. What's in the world? Well, we have a lot of markets because there are a lot of countries that need to industrialize, for them to grow. They need to grow. We got all these things that we made. We can provide it to them for them to grow. All right? And that is a long-term strategy, kind of like the situation with that friend, Xi. Because now if you grow and you purchase another 300 acres of farm and you bring it in the cooperative, Xi also growing too, as he's your partner. So China looked at it, if we help those other countries grow, as they grow, we grow too. And if you help in multiple countries, even if you're taking say, maybe 10% for what you put in, when you multiply with all the other countries' economy of scale, you will grow more. So what China is looking to do is these countries need these infrastructures. They need to industrialize. China will, in the short term, if you give loan and they build up, that's Chinese companies getting money back. If the country becomes industrialized, they want to trade with China more. Chinese providing know-how. Yeah. So that's China's long-term goal. On the short term, the diplomatic leverage, Africa provides them a diplomatic leverage against the West. That's a whole block of countries that they can count on to vote in their favor. They're not looking to colonize or recolonize Africa. So the lady, one thing she put out there was that maybe the Chinese got a long-term goal to then dominate Africa, probably colonize Africa. Well, as Yanis said, let's judge now. But let me say, let's ask the question: how do you judge try to predict the future or project the future? You look at the past, you look at the present, look at the past, what happened in the past, what's happening now in the present, and then you can project the future. Let's take a look at the West. What's happened in the past? They took Africans as slaves, treated them less than cattle. And when that was going away, they seized their country, treated them bad on their own land, colonized them, suck out their resources. And when that had to go away, they went to a new form, neo-colonialism. They put in leaders, they killed good leaders, and put in incompetent, greedy leaders who, for my money, I refuse to call them Africans, by the way. I refuse to call those bought and paid for charlatans Africans. They use them to then continue to exploit us and keep us perpetually underdeveloped. That's their approach. China, on the other hand, when they first went to Africa, Zheng Hao expedition in Africa, landed on the coast of Mombasa. They didn't stop and seize land. They didn't stop and enslave the people. They traded. Even when they went to India, to the Mughals, they traded. They went around and traded with people. That's what they did. In today's situation, they're not murdering leaders, fomenting civil wars, arm twisting people's hands. They're bringing trade, helping you industrialize. The West don't want you to industrialize. The president of Liberia was killed because he wanted to industrialize. It's helping you build infrastructure. They're helping you build infrastructure and industrialize. So now, after we have looked at the past of the West and the past of China, we have looked at the present of the West and the present of China. When we project to the future, who do we see as the bad guy or the good guy? So, when we think about these things, we need to think with a sober and objective mind. So, let's be able to see the forest, not the trees, right? And that theme, the course of that theme is that focus on the big picture, right? Don't look at one anecdotal situation with some Chinese guy saying that they want to conquer Africa, or some Chinese guy misbehaving. Look, everywhere in America, in Africa, they got country people. And in China, in Europe, everywhere they got some people country. And by country, I don't just mean like, but people who are, I don't just mean where they live only. I'm talking about people who are not cultured. Everywhere they have those people. Even in China, some Chinese people misbehave there. I remember a story where this lady on the bus was so pissed with the driver of the bus on the bridge, and she decided to give him several licks. She hit the driver trying to fight her off, and the bus ended up in the water, killing almost all of them. That's people. That's not the Chinese government. That's not their aggregate overall strategic plan. The Belt and Road Initiative is intended to lead this world into a trade co-op, if we want to go back to the story, to create a worldwide supply chain. And this, one of the things that it has indirect benefits is that countries on this chain has trading with one another. You guys can't fight now because you know that that other person is your supply chain and you are their supply chain. So maybe you guys can't fight anymore. All right. China is not doing this. You know, some people say because of their culture. I think the Confucius culture is pretty sophisticated. I could support that, but I don't think that is simply the reason why the Chinese not going the route of the West. They're not going the route of the West, simply put, because they are smarter. The route the West take is a zero-sum game. At some point in time, it will end. It has to end. The route the Chinese are going is one that can create perpetual growth for everybody. So when you see the forest, not the trees, some of the things that nations will do is realize they have opportunity to industrialize. No country has ever developed without trading with others, even China. When Deng Xiaoping went to Singapore and realized how backward China was, he decided to get the model. And he went back home and he opened up trading, starting with Japan, for them to trade with Japan. Japanese companies came in and did manufacturing. So some people, Africans who say, they're so pissed and say, okay, we don't want the West, we don't want China. First of all, if you don't want China, the West will still be on you because you have nowhere. You will still have nowhere to go. Remember, our countries, we have a young population with no prospects for the future. That's a recipe for disaster. So we need to industrialize. That opportunity comes with China and the multipolar world order. We need capacity building. China brings that. We need opportunities for growth and sustainable development so that our young can be able to prosper, not go into the sea in the Mediterranean trying to get to Europe. Also, coming with China is the fact that you don't have to worry about assassinations and regime change wars. No one's going to be trying to social engineer your society into a civil war. No more coup d'etats. You can have security. Nobody strangulating you like is done against Zimbabwe or Eritrea. And no one forcing you to have perpetual underdevelopment. We have to be reasonable people. So that's how you see the forest, not the trees. Stop paying attention to West. Africans as a whole, we're supposed to reflexively discard any suggestion the West give us. That's supposed to be our standard, and then we can reassess to see whether they're talking something good. But the standard is supposed to be us reflexively not listening to them. So the question that we started with and we're analyzing here today on this episode of the Upriver Crawfish was, is China a partner for Africa? My conclusion is China is a partner that Africa must choose. I don't think we have a choice on that. If Africa wants to develop, if they want growth, that's a partner we need to choose. If we fail to choose China, China is not going to stop rising. It's going to take longer for us to develop, that's all. It will be to our detriment, not to China's. You know, the U.S. always threatened China. The threat you see the U.S. use against China, we should understand that this is a threat really against the world, especially Africa. The U.S. can't fight China in a war. The U.S. is not going to do that. Can't destabilize China. They can't, for them to fight China economically, it cannot be directly. They're going to have to try to fight China through other ways. So guess what? That threat is going to the rest of the world. Anybody who wants to partner with China for growth. So Africa in particular is going to feel the pinch, especially in the next 5 to 10 years. It's going to be dangerous. Latin America too, but at least they're getting their act together. They're trying. Africa, we're still not trying. See, in Democratic Republic of Congo, the Chinese had a a deal with a $6 billion deal to build roads that the Africa needs, that the DRC needs, hospitals, stuff. The U.S. been fighting to get that canceled. They first went to the previous government and they found a way for China to downgrade that. Then once it's downgraded, they accuse China of putting substandard. They had the DRC people accuse China of building substandard infrastructure, and DRC and China was getting resources, mineral resources from there, and the DRC didn't have to pay them any money. It's not a loan. It was minerals for development, infrastructure development. Chinese were developing the country. U.S. kept pushing against them, and now Tshisekedi's government, from what I'm hearing, if it's true, looking to totally cancel it. And the Chinese government not going to fight. The Chinese government told the corporations, hey, from my understanding, at least that's what I heard, leave. Now the threat is against Tshisekedi and any other African politician there who are cowards, probably inept, probably paid for. They're the one who's not going to get a developed infrastructure. If the West comes in, the West will take the minerals. They would tell them to get loans from the IMF at exorbitant rates. And then most of the money from that loans will be funneled right back to the West. DRC would get not much anything, or they would be stuck with a high interest loans. Look at Guinea. Guinea was getting infrastructure for electricity, roads, whatever, for the bauxite, iron ore, and stuff. Here's the coup, Mamadi Doumbouya, puppet from France and the US, in power now, along with the paid for opposition, those charlatans. Take a look at Mozambique. Mozambique was they invited China and Russia in, and they were doing some deals. All of a sudden, supposedly Islamist rebels from Al-Shabaab, who, by the way, are in Somalia, don't care anything about and doing their stuff anywhere else but Somalia, left Somalia, somehow bypassed Kenya, who they have problem with for Kenya sending troops in Somalia. Bypassed Kenya, bypassed Tanzania, and came to Mozambique to cause trouble. The people in the area, Cabo Delgado, and Mozambique, and Mozamboa de Praia, the people in the area don't even know what the guys want. These guys just entered and start killing. So the people don't even know what exactly they want them to do. These guys just came and start killing and causing chaos. Quickly speaking, Rwanda, who's again in the western pockets, they are. Rwanda is a very tricky case that people don't quite understand. They are where you call in intelligence circles limited. I forgot the word. I forgot the word. But basically, they come and look like they're Africa oriented, but they're not. They're doing the bidding of the West. Oh, Kagame wants autonomy for his country. That part is true. He wants to do things for his country, but so that he can get to do things for the country the way he want. The West use him to go around and be a spoiler, just how they used to use the Liberian president William V.S. Tubman to be a spoiler against Pan-Africanism. So long they Mozambique gets rid of the deals with Russia and China, they get Ugandan troops to go and help them. I don't even know if they actually going to get rid of the problem or just try to manage it, because usually that's what the U.S. try to do, manage it. Yeah. But in any case, the U.S. is fighting against a force that they cannot deploy an army against. It is reality. They're fighting against reality. They have caused so much misery and destruction in this world that it has actually given customers, eager customers, to China. And you can go ahead and scare people, kill a few, strangulate a few, do all that. Eventually, that dam will burst. They're fighting against the reality of the death, destruction, and abject misery they have sowed around the world in their zero-sum game. They are fighting against the reality that a hungry man is an angry man. The man will fight harder and quicker for his belly than he will fight for his rights. They're fighting against the reality that in a unipolar world, the sole sovereign will continue to face increasing agitations from external subjects because it's racist. That type of world where one country, one group of people should be the sovereign over others is racist. And they're fighting against the reality that all empires must and will fall. They think they're fighting against China, but they're fighting against reality. They can't stop China. The only way to actually reverse what China is doing is to, outside of an act of God, is to actually attack them physically with military force. They can't do it. And Asia is not going to go along with them. That is the bigger thing. Africa is a poodle that the U.S. already have recolonized. That's what that war in Libya was about. That as the war was named, the operation was called Operation Odyssey Dawn. Odyssey means journey. Dawn means the beginning. The beginning of what journey? The beginning of the recolonization of Africa. In Africa right now, there are two sovereign countries. There's Algeria, two fully sovereign countries, Algeria and Eritrea. Ethiopia is trying to be sovereign right now, but they're battling the West with that TPLF nonsense that's happening over there. They're fighting right now for their sovereignty. Hopefully Abiy Ahmed is strong enough. But that's it, folks, for this episode of the Upriver Crawfish. Again, I'm Sankara, your host. I hope you guys will like, share, and subscribe. I will do better. This is my first foray. I will do better with the production and the editing. I will learn, and some folks can give me pointers. I will be glad to take your pointers. Sankara is out.